What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and today we're going to talk about PlayStation because there is a lot of discussion and, quite frankly, a lot of hatred being directed at Sony today because of Square Enix. And I want to try and break it down because I am a big lover of Final Fantasy. I've said this a million times on the channel, but my two favorite things of all time is Resident Evil and Final Fantasy, and it's been kind of bizarre to watch how Capcom continues to grow, how obviously we keep getting this new era, this new renaissance of Resident Evil, while Final Fantasy does in its own efforts sort of seem to be struggling to stay relevant and to stay profitable. And today, with the release of a bunch of financial reports, people are mad that Sony may be screwing over Square Enix to some degree, but I want to break it down. Hi, hope you're having a great day, and if you could please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. So here's the headline that seems to be very much setting the internet on fire, which is that Square Enix is experiencing a big year-on-year drop in sales despite the release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, this game is gigantic. I actually beat Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I don't have the Platinum Trophy yet, but this game is genuinely one of the biggest $70 games I've ever played. It is hundreds and hundreds of hours of content, but it does feel like for as hyped as it was, as excited as fans could be, the game didn't really make that big of a splash. And a lot of people, pretty much every single reply, every single tweet I see is people saying, well, if you release your games on multiple platforms, it's a lot easier to be profitable as a publisher. I mean, literally everybody is saying, well, if you release these games on PC, maybe we could play them. I mean, if I have to buy a PlayStation 5, if you're not even going to release it on PlayStation 4 and I don't have this console yet, how the heck can I buy it? Now, I find this interesting because I do feel like this person brings up a good point. A smaller pool of players. The discussion about this is interesting because it's not just completely cut and dry. They are still making a profit. Their income is still up. It's that their sales continue to decrease. And I think it's just the fact that, honestly, this part here, they're making themselves more profitable by cutting development costs, which probably means like scaling down teams and cutting down advertising. And a lot of people have been saying this seems like a gigantic mistake. Like, okay, you're still using Unreal Engine to make it so you can reuse assets and make stuff quicker to make, which means a higher profit margin, but also cutting advertising. People are not going to buy a game that they don't know exists. But I do think this heavily falls upon the fact that the PlayStation 5, as big as it is, as successful as it is, there's already over 50 million PlayStation 5 sold, I still feel like it is a smaller splash in the pan than the previous generation. Like, the fact that games are still coming to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, I feel like this is a sign, and I think it's a bad sign. People are broke. I think worldwide the economy is down. Everybody is struggling. Pay is incredibly terrible at this point. So if you're going to buy a game, even if it's something you're extremely excited about, it's just about having access. The amount of people that actually played freaking Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is an incredibly good game, a lot of people bought this game. They love this game. People love the Final Fantasies. But the point is the fact that if you have to buy another console, like people that are excited for Final Fantasy 16, how many people are actually going to buy a complete console for $500 minimum? Like, it's $500 here in America for a PlayStation. In other parts of the world, it's even more expensive than that. Who is actually going to buy it if you've already had a cheap PlayStation 4 in your house for 10 years? Are you really actually going to go out and buy something for just that? A lot of people are saying, well, will they bounce back when we get that PC release? Will these games find success? Will they find a second win when they're released on PC? Honestly, I think they will, and I think they are going to really rely upon that. I have been predominantly gaming on PC a lot this year, especially my Steam Deck. And I feel like it's not just that PC games look better and play better and stuff like that and are customizable with mods and stuff like that. I almost feel like it is just the ubiquitous nature. Steam is so easy to access, and a huge chunk of the planet actually prefers PC gaming. Like, a lot of people just do not want to actually buy a console simply for exclusives. And I think it's interesting that as PC, which is already such a dominant ecosystem, continues to grow, I wonder if Sony is beginning to regret this deal, if they're going to end up harming this. Like, obviously, the PlayStation continues to sell. The PlayStation just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Sony exclusives sell well. But I wonder if Sony is beginning to think, okay, are we harming our buddies here with this partnership? The rumor is that what they've been doing to make this lucrative for Square Enix is, the talk on the street is that they have been partially funding these projects, that instead of just, paying for an exclusivity, it sounds like Sony, to some degree, is actually footing the bill. They're paying for the development of these games and giving them free development kits and stuff like that to keep it so that Final Fantasy games stay exclusive, and a lot of other stuff is also coming exclusively to the PlayStation. But I wonder, at what point does Square Enix say, we got to rewrite this? What can we actually do? The failure of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I know some people are going to get upset at me, the lack of overwhelming success of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, to me, is a tragedy. It is a catastrophe. And a lot of people are basically saying, well, you've kind of screwed yourselves because Rebirth is going to have a ceiling. It can't just be an infinite growth market. I mean, you're asking people to pay $70 for a sequel to a game that maybe they didn't buy and didn't finish. So if people bought Final Fantasy VII Remake and about 50% of people beat it, that means now you have to buy the next console, the PlayStation 5, and then pay $70 for that. The actual margin, the amount of people that are going to do that, it is a completely shrinking pool. And a lot of people are saying this is just such an odd thing because, honestly, it's probably the end of these big budget remakes. I like this comment here where a person says, we need to savor that next game, Final Fantasy VII Revengeance or whatever ends up being called, because Square Enix definitely will not be doing another remake like it ever again. And yeah, I do think that for those of us who have been begging for a Xenogears remaster or a Chrono Trigger remake or something like that, those projects are probably going to be incredibly tiny and bare bones compared to the size, the scale, the craziness of Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy. I guess the part of it that's just strange to me is that these exclusivity agreements, I don't think that anybody could have predicted how bad for business they are. The gaming industry is in a incredibly tough point. I mean, the amount of studios, the amount of closures, the amount of layoffs, the amount of just bad games, I think people are becoming extremely hesitant. I made a video last year where there was this report that almost everybody was playing stuff that was older. People are still playing The Witcher and freaking old World of Warcraft Classic and stuff like that. It's not just that people are nostalgic for older games, it's that a lot of those games still look good, they play good, they're dirt cheap, and they run on pretty much anything. I think we're getting to this point where we're hitting a saturation exhaustion where people just cannot afford that next big game. And even if they're excited for it, they're really having to pick and choose. And look, I'm completely obsessed with a lot of these games, but I think we're going to hit that dot hack problem. You've probably never heard of this, but I'm very obsessed with it. There's this series called Dot Hack. They're like fake MMORPGs with really cool stories. love them a bunch, but back in the day, they released a quadrilogy and then a trilogy, and the way it worked is with each of the games, you'd beat it, you'd make a save file, then you bought the next game, and you continued to play it. So you had this hundreds and hundreds of hour journey with grinding and all sorts of cool side quests and stuff like that, but it had a diminishing returns of success, where the first game may sell a couple million copies, but the second one is going to sell 500,000 copies. The third one's going to sell 200,000 copies. The fourth one's going to sell 20,000 copies. You know, I feel like we're hitting this point where, because games are trying to constantly outdo each other with budgets and advertising and size and scale and DLC content and stuff, I think people are getting exhausted in a way that nobody could have predicted. I do think that the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, when it is done, is actually going to see a huge spike in sales. And I'll totally stand by that. I'm recording this here on August 6th. 2024. I think when this is all said and done, which obviously won't be in a couple years, I think the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy is going to sell forever. The same way that the original FF7 continues to sell and be talked about and modded and loved on. I think that once it's done, once you can put it on one massive set of discs and just sell it as a singular boxed copy, I think it will finally be successful. But trying to space this out, trying to make the FF7 remake into a 10-year-long project, in my opinion, even as a fan, was a failure. This was a bad idea. And no amount of FF16 and Final Fantasy 14 expansions and stuff, I think they've put themselves in a precarious position. So, Sony, I know you guys like exclusivity contracts, but for the good of Square Enix, maybe try and loosen the terms of that. At least let them launch day and date on PC. I think that's only going to help you guys, and it's definitely going to help Square Enix. But these are just my off-the-cuff thoughts. I could be 100% wrong. I don't know. I play games. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But I do love reading all this stuff. So tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please keep dreaming. Oh man, I can't wait for the FF7 Remake trilogy to be done, because as much as I liked Rebirth, the ending of the first game and the second game, not my favorite. Not my favorite. I want to see how it all ends at the end. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.